Uh, yeah, anybody who happens to be listening, this is the next episode in Intercourse with Copying. And today I have a friend on, Roger Levesque. I met Roger actually in 2012, and we'll get into that shortly. So thank you for taking part in this, Roger.
You're jogging my own memory.
Guess what I found?
Oh,
That's the newspaper article when you were the music reviewer, Arts and Life of the Edmonton Journal. And you were very kind, I have to say, in your review. And I thank you for that.
well, I've always had sympathized with struggling musicians, I guess. So
Yeah,
most musicians and actors, waiters or
yeah,
something.
yeah. Everybody has to wear a number of hats, that's for sure. Just for my own interest, I know I just mentioned here that you were the music critic for the Edmonton Journal. When did
Or
you?
one of the music critics, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right. Well, you were one of them, and
Yeah.
thankfully I got to meet you. So there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you give me a little bit of your background? I haven't really asked you about how you got into journalism and how you got into.
Well, where to start?
Yeah.
Before the COVID pandemic, just leading into that, I had put in 35 plus years in music media in one form or another. 26 years in radio, in various public radio stations that Edmonton has, specifically about roughly 20 years at CJSR radio, another 5 or 6 at CKUA radio.
Oh, wow.
And freelance work with CBC radio. That's a part of my career that essentially ended or went into some kind of non-existence
Yeah.
A few years back in a big layoff, but I miss it dearly.
What specifically were you doing though as a radio?
In radio?
Yeah.
I did a whole bunch of shows over the years. I did a whole bunch of stuff. I was editor of the monthly music magazine that CJSR used to put out in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
I was a DJ for years and years and years, for 26 years, I think.
Wow.
Mostly most people think of me as the jazz guy because I did jazz shows the majority of the time, but not exclusively by any means. And jazz is not the only kind of music I know or care about, contrary to what many people might think. And then overlapping all that, and then following after the radio ended, I have been in print media for over 30 years, until a year ago when the pandemic started. 31 years as a freelance writer with the Edmonton Journal and other outlets like Penguin Eggs magazine, for instance, and
Right.
Various things over the years. And so that's been kind of going nowhere for a year as well, given that there is no performing arts scene anymore.
Yeah, with the COVID. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I miss live music hugely as well, and the performing arts in general.
With the advent of online, I guess, alternative news type things, which I have to admit, I'm more interested in listening to some of that, quite a number of podcasts and other news outlets. I don't pay much attention to the mainstream anymore. In terms of the actual job that you had, did you see that the print, what do you call it, papers, were having difficulty because of the advent of the internet?
Oh yeah, sure. I think one of the big problems for print media and vehicles like the Edmonton Journal, for instance, which is now part of the Post Media newspaper chain, I think part of the problem is that the powers that be at those places did not foresee the huge impact that the internet and social media specifically
Yeah.
was going to have on print media and other media. And by the time they did start to understand that they were losing their audience to mostly to social media, that and Google and so on, they it was already too late. Too much of the audience had already migrated. I mean, now of course, every newspaper, every publication that's a going concern still is also on the internet. So it's a matter of transferring it to another outlet, another source of media. But yeah, things have changed in the 31 years I wrote for the Edmonton Journal. Things have changed hugely, just beyond belief.
Yeah. Did you find it there was, because of this change that you saw, or as you say, they were behind the trend that was happening? Did that impact in terms of the amount of work that you could get?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I've always been a freelancer. I was never ever a full-time employee.
Right.
So technically everything I've written for the Edmonton Journal was always piecework. Even though at the height of my term with them, the amount of work I was doing amounted to a full-time job often.
Right.
There were many months during the 1990s, for instance. There were many months when I would be responsible for maybe even as many as 15 or 20 pieces, which is as many or sometimes even more than some of the full-time writers.
Oh, wow.
And much of that depended on exactly how much was going on in the arts scene at the time.
Right.
And I was not just a music writer by any stretch either. During my sojourn with the Edmonton Journal, I wrote about music mostly, and mostly jazz and blues and roots and world music, whatever that is.
Right.
So sort of a disputed term these days. So mostly the marginal music areas, as I refer to them. But on top of that, over the years, I covered just about every other subject that the newspaper's arts section covered, including a lot of movie reviews,
Right.
a lot of movies. I think I wrote a couple pieces on TV. I covered the symphony a few times. You name it.
Did you ever get involved in the Fringe at all?
Oh, I was a regular at the Fringe every summer because the newspaper would send out a team of all of the arts writers, usually, to file as many capsule reviews of the Fringe as they possibly could.
Right.
And so yeah, everybody was there filing reviews, and so I've done more Fringes than I can count. Probably 20 Fringes at least.
Wow. Yeah, I've been involved in quite a number of Fringes, and of course I was one of those ones who would get the paper and looking for what star did we get? How many stars did we get?
Of course.
The usual stuff. But
yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the day too when we hoped anyway that a lot of people did check their newspaper listings every day to check what was hot or not at the Fringe, and that obviously has changed over the years hugely too. Now it's about checking your smartphone to see what got a good review.
In terms of the standardized patient, and I should just tell people standardized patient is a program. We're professional role players, if you like, which we then help in the training of doctors, nurses, EMTs, the whole gamut of the medical field.
Yeah.
And so I've been doing that now for since I started acting, which is well over 20 years now.
Just over 4 years for me.
Now, was that how did you get into that? Because did you hear about
Kind
it?
of by chance.
Okay.
I mean, I knew about standardized patient work well over 20 years ago because a friend of mine who was U of A Bachelor of Fine Arts grad, a drama grad,
Right.
had been doing it during his term in school there. And but that was one of the things that sort of misled me about it all, because I thought that you had to have previous training, dramatic training, to be involved in the first place.
Right.
And otherwise, I might have actually tried my hand at it earlier. So it was only it would be 5 years ago this spring, actually, that I found myself talking to an old friend who told me he had been involved in this for years.
Wow.
And I said, "Oh, I didn't know you had any drama training." And he said, "Well, I don't. They train you."
Yeah.
And that's when I was at a particularly weirdly low point at the time, and the thought of something new and different in my life seemed like a positive idea at the time. And so I got in and checked it out, and
No.
Life's never been quite the same.
Exactly. Well, we got to renew again our acquaintance.
Yes.
I'd like to think of you more as more of a friend than an acquaintance, but
Yeah.
I mean, we don't hang out and drink beers together, but
Well, not lately.
not lately, that's for sure. Though you could, as far as I'm concerned. But anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm glad that we renewed our acquaintance again through that program.
Can I throw in something?
Yes,
The thing that puzzled me, or well, that I tossed around in my head for probably the first 2 years of doing SP work was, is this role playing or is this bona fide acting? Because I knew that there were many bona fide actors such as yourself involved in the program, and I thought, well, what am I doing here? Do I have the right to even tell myself that I'm brushing on the acting profession here?
Yeah.
And of course, the truth is, first of all, two things. One is that the number of roles that are involved in SP work differ vastly from one extreme to the other. As I'm sure you would agree. Some of them do not really involve playing a role at all. Some of them just involve being a warm body for medical students to check out.
I call it the poke and prod sessions.
There you go.
Yeah.
And some of them on the opposite extreme, some of, I think what you and I have referred to as more of the psych roles, involving, psychological issues and psychological behavior of patients, training psych nurses, stuff like that. Some of them are to the opposite extreme of just really learning the character or learning the backstory of a character and doing full out improvisation for maybe 20 minutes or so to portray that person as a challenge to the medical trainee, the medical student.
Yeah, some of my favorites are ones where I get to be manic or totally depressed, on the verge of suicide, those types of things. And yeah,
me too. And it sounds strange that you would have such fun maybe with playing a quasi-suicidal role. A
Yeah.
lot of people have looked at me when I told them that, but it's true.
Yeah, that is. I think primarily because we don't normally go there ourselves.
Yeah,
So it's kind of fun to explore those things, knowing that this is not a way of life for me. You know.
exactly.
So
Well, and incidentally, the day I decided that, beyond the extreme of roles that I just mentioned, that I just referred to, the day I decided that there was bona fide acting involved in this profession as standardized patients,
mhm,
was the day that you and I had dinner in the middle of it. The day that I taught myself to cry and made myself cry for a bunch of simulations for students. They were trying to get students from different disciplines to work together in sort of interview committees, and I was one of the patients to be interviewed by them.
right. Yeah. I think a lot of people think that, well, like you say, you didn't know if you deserved to be there because you weren't a trained actor. But I find that with most things, if you believe it, what you're doing, if you believe it, the person that you're dealing with will believe it too.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's really the only secret, is just believe it and live in that moment of it, whatever it is.
It was. I will never forget. It was a stunning experience
Yeah.
to do that. Not only for myself to make it happen, and I still don't pretend to be, some expert trained actor or anything.
Yeah.
But I will say I was stunned that I did take on the role that I did, which was quite a complex role,
Mhm.
and that I made everyone believe it, because at some points, and I came to understand, briefly as it was that one day, I came to understand immediately the thrill that bona fide actors do get from working in that profession all the time, which is literally having people's brains in the palm of your hand.
Yeah.
There's and God forbid that it ever adds to my ego, but there is a sense of power knowing that, especially, there were times where there were maybe 15 people in the room, and I realized they were riveted to what I was expressing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an amazing feeling, in fact, that's how I got into acting. Was I mean, I sort of played around with it growing up. I was in high school. I was in a couple of plays, but I was too shy, and I was doing magic at that time, and performing kind of thing, but still kind of shy.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't until 20 some odd years ago, I was in my 50s, and I took a adult course along with my wife, who was in management, and so she wanted to take an acting course to help her get over her fear of being, holding a meeting, talking to people. And I loved I liked it so much that we did a one-up play, Aristophanes' The Birds, and I remember towards the end, and I played three parts, and we did mask work. So we had
Wow.
to make masks, and then you put them on and go through the whole process of developing a character based on the feel of this mask. And I
Yeah.
was blown away. I just when we were standing on the side waiting for the curtain to close, or the show to end, I should say, and to come out to take our bow, I went, I don't want this to end. It was just so enthralling. That was the sort of the impetus that got me into acting full time. Yeah, I just was blown away by it. So yeah, it's an amazing feeling. Yeah, there's times when I've never felt more alive than when I'm on a stage.
Sure.
Yeah,
Ironically, inhabiting somebody else's life.
yeah, yeah. I remember I did quills, as the Marquis de Sade, and it was an amazing role, amazing play. And I remember standing on the side waiting for my cue to come in, scared shitless, saying to myself, "What the fuck have I done? You know, and what am I doing?" And you hear your cue, you come out, and boom, you know, you just inhabit. And then, like I say, believe what you're doing is real.
Yeah, yeah.
People buy it, you know.
I guess there's kind of an irony there. Maybe the truth is that our own regular lives are so boring
Could be.
that it's inevitable that playing somebody else is more fun.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, because you're inhabiting a world that you probably would never take part in.
Yeah.
I don't do so much anymore, but to be honest with you, my energy has dropped considerably. But when I started when I was 50, and I thought to myself, well, I've got 20 years of good energy, and so I made use of it. I was in all kinds of plays and film and TV stuff, and just nonstop almost. And but you know, it's almost 25 years now, and I'm going, I just can't. Just don't have the enthusiasm that I used to have.
One thing I'd like to ask you is, I was thinking about this just the other day when I was watching something on the internet about the Danish director Lars von Trier, the movie director, who I'm quite fond of watching his films, though I would be the first to admit that they are difficult. More than often than not, they're difficult to watch, and I'm not sure I would necessarily consider any of his films a complete success. But his last film, The House That Jack Built, uses the actor Matt Dillon as a serial killer, and it's incredibly violent and not a very nice story,
Right.
to say the least. Probably the nastiest source of violence that has ever shown up in Lars von Trier's career, which is saying something. Anyway, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, what kind of, you know, much as we were just saying, you can, you know, a well trained person can get a lot of satisfaction from portraying specific characters. What sort of benefit might an actor get from playing a serial killer? Like, what is that likely to do to you that would be fun, let alone, you know?
Yeah, it's a good question.
And I'm sure you've played roles that we might call, you know, dark in some way or another. But have you ever played anyone who's like truly evil?
I did one called, how was it called? Two. It was called Two, and it was set in an English pub. There was one character who was a wife beater, and so I had to come out as this character, and was really abusive to his wife, and you know, at one point he backhands her and kind of thing.
Right.
And the audience, again, it's amazing. They get so caught up in it, and you could just, I mean, one person said, just was so upset by what was happening in front of them that they called out something. I can't remember exactly what, you bastard, or you you know, like really, you know, if I could, you know, have a gun, I'd shoot you type thing.
Well, it tells you you were doing a good job.
Well, that's the thing, yeah, and so I mean, I enjoyed that as much, but again, it was one of the characters in it, so it wasn't like it wasn't a 2 hours of playing a malevolent character kind of thing.
Right, right.
The only thing I could say about that, I'm not a method actor, but just you have to find something, because every person, that whatever they do, they believe what they're doing is right, or for them, and so you've got to find that portion that is not that you love them per se, but you have to understand that, what they're doing, they believe is correct or right for them. And
At least for a moment.
for the moment, yeah.
I feel tremendously lucky that I discovered this, even if that's as far as it goes for me, just my limited experience in SP work. I feel hugely lucky that I got into it and at relatively late time in my life, and it's just been a really positive thing.
I don't know if you're comfortable with this, but I also wanted to mention about the fact that you have had recently a cancer situation, and
yeah, well, it's pretty public since last December.
well, as a matter of fact, I just happened to have something here just for the audience to look at if they want to. Hold on a sec. There it is. Okay, this is from the Journal. This is
Right.
Cancer Patients' View of the Health System Under COVID-19 Stress. I have to say, by the way, that's an excellent picture of you.
Oh, thank you. Well, thanks to Greg Southam, who I spent 3 hours with doing that photo session.
Really?
I felt like a would-be fashion model by the end or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I've never been, I'm pretty sure I was photographed more times that day than I have been in my entire life previous to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well.
But for just for a little background, I decided to shop a couple of long stories to the Edmonton Journal, my former regular employer as a freelance writer.
Right.
They ran in the insight section of the Edmonton Journal. I'm sure you can still bring them up by search.
Yeah.
They ran in the Journal in the hard copy in December 5 and December 12, 2020, and basically sketched out the experience I had had starting on the Labor Day weekend in September of 2020, spending 12 days in hospital, after which I eventually was diagnosed with, pretty serious case of cancer. I mean, it's supposed to be stage 4, though never say never.
Right.
And then the subsequent experience of after being in hospital and being diagnosed, the subsequent experience of going to my orientation at the Cross Cancer Institute, which I have now been attending unbelievably for some 20 weeks plus.
Wow.
Because tomorrow is I'm signed up for cycle number 11 of chemotherapy.
Wow.
And each cycle is a 2-week period. So I'm just at the end of 20 weeks.
Wow. And you had said to me earlier when I spoke to you on the phone that unlike a lot of people who end up with side effects from the chemo, losing hair and the nausea and all that stuff, that you were fairly free of that? Is that still?
I have been, on the whole, I have been incredibly lucky in that way.
Oh, good.
In 20 weeks, I have never had anything more than just a hint of nausea, no vomiting. On the other hand, there have been a few side effects that have come about in a more long-term and subtle way that I was not really expecting. One of the ones I'm most tired of right now is the fact that everything I taste has a metallic taste.
All right.
Everything.
Yeah.
And that gets really annoying after a while. And it's as you might guess, it's even affected my appetite for eating, period.
Oh, sure.
But be that as it may, I am in no pain. I have never had more than some minor cramps from this whole experience. And so in that respect, I'm incredibly lucky. And if I find myself bitching and complaining about this sometimes to family or friends, all I have to do is remember that the next time I go to sit down and get my chemo hookup at the cross, I will probably be sitting across from somebody in the same room who looks obviously to be in a much worse situation than I am, and that sort of brings home the reality of things and makes me realize again that I'm a lucky guy.
Yeah, yeah. I should say to the audience, if you get a chance to read your two-part series in the journal, I was really impressed with your writing. I have to say, and I think I told you that already. But yeah, it's well worth the read.
I really appreciate such sentiments, and I have to admit that it was I'm not exaggerating to say it was a huge thing in my life personally. I have never written anything that personal.
Right.
I'm a relatively, as you may know, I'm a relatively private person.
Yeah.
Being in the media for 35 years does that to you.
Yeah.
Um, and so I've never written anything quite that personal, though, and it's still right up until the day it was published. It kind of freaked me out that I was putting as much myself out there as I did,
Yeah.
and the photos and the whole bit. I'm just not that sort of guy most of the time.
Right.
But within 24 hours of it being published, I felt completely validated that not only did it seem that people agreed it was a good story, which was my original motivation behind the whole thing, but that it seemed to be helping other people in reading what this experience was all about,
Sure.
and helping, possibly helping other people dealing with illness as well, and that made me feel very, very good.
So, what have you got on your plate, or any ideas, or any things that projects, or anything that you might?
Well, still doing a little bit of SP work, acting work, and as you know, most of that these days is by Zoom.
Yeah.
Um, I, in addition to that, and my writing and radio, I had a couple of other little part-time jobs, one of which involved painting home interiors, which uh, more more often than not, I really enjoyed.
Hmm. That's
That
fun.
has gone by the wayside in the light of COVID.
Yeah.
I don't know if that'll ever happen again. Um, Suffice to say that I have been at a bit of a dead end deciding what to do with myself, because when you have what's been pronounced as a palliative case of cancer, everything is a bit up in the air and everything is a bit uncertain. And even though the results of my chemotherapy seem promising at this particular stage, um, I'm also wary enough to know that can be a very unpredictable temporary thing in dealing with cancer, and that things could change on a moment's notice. And so,
Yeah. Unless there's something else you wanted to add, I think we can end this up. And I do thank you so much for participating in this.
my pleasure.
Yeah.